Okay, we are all set up. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first seminar of the SMR Spring Open Seminar Series. Before introducing our speaker, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the School of Materials Research and what it represents. SMR is a unique education and research platform that brings together institutions and scholars from around the world to explore the various materialism at play in contemporary science, philosophy, art, mathematics, design, architecture, and politics. It was founded by the Center for Philosophical Technologies at Arizona State University, the Institute of Social Sciences and Humanities Skopje, the Department for Architecture, Theory, and Philosophy of Techniques at TU Vienna, and the Critical Inquiry Lab at the Design Academy Eindhoven. Together, we form a global hub for education, research, and experimentation, and at the intersection of the humanities, social sciences, creative fields, and STEM disciplines. Currently, SMR offers an integrated credit program for the spring semester, which is already underway, as well as a summer school held at our campus in Olympia, Greece, historic known as Tagira, the birthplace of Aristotle. This year's summer school, Physics 2025, will feature lecturers by Dorian Segan, John Malarka, Thomas Neal, Katerina Kolozova, Joel White, and Claire Segan. The Physics Summer School delivers into the origins of the philosophy and science in Greek antiquity, focusing on the study of physics, nature, as the fundamentation of relations and philosophical thought. If you're interested in applying, the deadline for on-site participation is tomorrow, but there will be opportunity to apply for online participation in the coming months. More details can be found on the SMR website. Now, I took the brief detour because today's speaker has a special connection to the SMR. She was one of the participants in the very first SMR summer school, the Feminine in the Age of Anthropological Transformation, which featured new thinkers as Kristeva, Mikulchina, and Kolozova. It is a true pleasure to introduce Maja Kantar. Maja is a researcher exploring Ernst Bloch, utopian philosophy in relations to emancipatory politics. She holds degrees in political science, peace studies, and postcolonial theory from the University of Belgrade in Kent. He is currently pursuing a PhD while teaching politics and literature theory in the University of London. The title of today's talk is Hope in the Pluriverse, Materiality and Temporality of Utopia. So, I need to shut up now because I took too much time from Maja. Maja, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Riste. I want to thank you and Katerina and everybody else at the school for having me. I'm really happy to be here and really happy to participate in what the school is doing. I think you're doing great and interesting things. And I also want to welcome everybody joining us today. So my seminar today, a little lecture, will be delving into the political philosophy and the philosophical thought of Ernst Bloch. As you could have seen from the brief abstract, it will deal with the materiality of utopia, hope in Blochian thought, notions of possibility, how he sees possibility, different kinds of utopian temporality. And we will venture by the end of it, into some literature. Hopefully there will be time for everything. And today's lecture is going to be divided in 3 parts, so to say. The first one will be dealing with hope and materiality of utopia. The second part will be dealing with its temporality, the way that Bloch understands it. Also, we'll be going into notions of concrete utopia and what is concrete according to Bloch, into notions of possibility as well. And then to conclude, we're going to look at Kim Stanley Robinson's novels, the Mars trilogy, the Red, Green, and Blue Mars. Okay, so let's begin. So the figure of Ernst Bloch presents us with a kind of a paradox, because his life was profoundly marked by the catastrophes of the 20th century. He was living and working mostly from the 1920s to the 1970s. And yet, during these years of persecution, repression, and exile, Bloch did something apparently strange. He developed a powerful and influential philosophy of hope. In the face of catastrophe, the death camps, the nuclear bomb, the degradation of socialism, Bloch focused on the question of utopia, through which he demonstrates that a world free of oppression and exploitation is not only necessary, but real and possible. Expectation, hope, intention towards possibility that has still not become. This is not only a basic feature of human consciousness, but concretely, corrected and grasped, a basic determination within objective reality as a whole. This is Bloch from The Principle of Hope. His thought on hope is a sort of a Marxist atheism, a secular political theology, which situates hope and utopia in society and history, thus giving it a materialist grounding. To hope is to thrust towards the future, and full hope is one that ever shows the marks and traces of going beyond the limited. Every hope implies the highest good, says Bloch. Even the weakest hope essentially relates to all. Expectation affects, among which the primary is hope, inevitably have the paradisical as an unconditional feature of their intentional object. As a form of an operative principle, hope is located at the center of Bloch's philosophy of utopia, where it is articulated as an utopian function itself. Hope is a tendency that opens the present beyond itself by installing a potentiality beyond all possibility in the here and now. Bloch aims to make room for a sense of utopia that is not necessarily pejorative. The route to such a sense begins with his analysis of daydreams. These are what give the clue to the reality of anticipatory consciousness. Daydreams are not best understood, as Freud understood them, as a preparatory or fragmentary phase of night dreams. Both night dreams and daydreams deal with wish fulfillments, and those of night bear on fulfillments which are veiled and related to the past, but those of day are essentially anticipatory and inventive. This does not, of course, mean that daydreams are reliable simply as they stand. So daydreams, Bloch maintains, differ from those of night in several and significant ways. Daydreams are not subject to the determinisms the way night dreams are. They aim at improving the world they depict. They're always going somewhere, not in a closed sort of way. What reflections on daydreams reveal is a second threshold of consciousness. The first and more familiar threshold leads to the pre-conscious or the unconscious of the side of the past. Here are what is forgotten or repressed, what is no longer conscious. But Bloch submits that daydreams indicate a threshold on the other side, leading into the not yet conscious. This is a terrain relatively unexplored, and yet it can be recognized, meaning it can be known. Bloch maintains that exploration of such terrain is crucial for understanding the type of cognition involved in hoping. In other words, hope as an anticipatory opening beyond the given is a sort of effective knowledge. To clarify the utopian function in this effective cognition, so to say, it is important to underscore the difference between fulfilled and expectant affects. Fulfilled are the affects directed to what is present or near at hand, for example, envy, greed, and respect. Expectation affects look to what is not yet at hand, hope, faith, and also fear. With expectation affects, there is always something as yet uncertain about the outcome. Such uncertainty is rooted in the kind of future intended in expectation affects. Fulfilled affects have no genuine future. What will be is already established. An expectation affect looks to a genuine future, to what as yet is not. In this sense, we can bring together the cognitive aspect that shows up as anticipatory consciousness and the affective aspect wherein hoping includes desiring. Hoping appears not just as an emotion, but as a conscious with respect to its act and known with respect to its content. It becomes the utopian function of consciousness. And now to quote Bloch, and thus we've reached the point where hope, the expectation affect proper to forward-oriented dreaming, no longer presents itself as simply as emotional state of the self, but shows up conscious and known as utopian function. In other words, hope that knows what it wants and wants what it knows. There is a collective aspect to such utopian hoping. Utopian function cannot be reduced to simply identified with imagining pursuits of one's individual interests or private desires, yet is in touch with these inasmuch as what is aimed is at a social good that affects all individuals. And though this utopian function looks like similar to ideology, or might look similar to ideology, because both envision what is not, nevertheless, the utopian function, if it's true to itself, according to Bloch, is a spur to action beyond the unmasking of ideologies. Furthermore, the utopian function of consciousness should not be confused with that function by which people hold ideals, especially insofar as the ideals inspire and guide, but fall short of actualization. The utopian is a function attuned to the real. It is aimed not at approximation, but actualization. If all this might sound a bit metaphysical or phenomenological, it is important now to note that the materiality of Bloch's Utopia is always grounded in the concrete. So let's dive into the concrete a bit. For Bloch, Utopia is closely related to both the possible and the actual. As he writes, the point of contact between dreams and life, without which dreams only yield abstract utopia, life only triviality, is given in the utopian capacity, which is set on its feet and connected to the real possible, and which in fact tendentially transcends what exists in each respective case, not only in our nature, but in that of the entire external world of process. However, it might sound that concrete utopia is a kind of contradictory phrase, a kind of oxymoron. In its ordinary sense, we think that utopia is an empty political vision that is not related to actual reality, an imaginary, unrealistic place. The answer to this lies in the history of philosophical thought on the notions of abstract and concrete from Descartes, Leibniz, Kant, and Hegel. We're not going to go through this now, but just to mention some positions on Kant, that in his deliberations of the practical reason, Kant banishes aesthetics from the sphere of knowledge, as it is supposed to be free from the realm of instrumental reason, and thus pushing whatever insights it may provide to the ontological and epistemological margins. However, Kant simultaneously compulsively subjugated the concrete sensible to the abstract categories of the understanding. In this sense, as Bloch reads, he has made it impossible to come into direct contact with the world. Hegel reverses this hierarchy and claims that the abstract is no longer the goal or virtue of thought, but a form of thinking that is poor in concepts. Though the famous example of the murderer, Hegel argues that abstract thoughts fails to capture complexity, and he claims that, quote, this is abstract thinking, to see nothing in the murderer except the abstract fact that he is a murderer, and so annul all other human essences in him with this simple quality. So for Hegel, thought develops by moving from the abstract to concrete. The abstract is abstracted from a process which is raw. In contrast, the concrete is the dialectical development of the unity of contrasts and the synthesis of different and opposite definitions, capable of expressing the unique and particular nature of things. In his lectures on the history of philosophy, Hegel says that the true is concrete, and the concrete is the unity of diverse determinations. In this sense, Hegel views the concrete and the abstract not as opposites, but as different degrees of development. Now, returning to the concept of utopia, an abstract utopia is a utopia that is taken out from the process, presented as truth that exists somewhere, like an island surrounded by water, which needs to be revealed. In contrast, Bloch's concept of concrete utopia is influenced by Hegel's concept of the concrete, according to which it is not the immediately sensible, but the product of a process. Thus, in contrast to the previous philosophical traditions, in which the concrete is perceived either as an immediate given, vague and unclear, or as closed in space of meaning, of immediate identification, and therefore also sometimes mistaken, Hegel, and following him Bloch, perceived the concrete as the result of a process that is complex, richly detailed, and unites opposites, but is also open to change and to the future. The way that utopia is brought out from the abstract to the concrete is through the category of the real possible, which involves the agency of both subjects and objects. This is now Bloch, this is not Hegel anymore. On this notion of the real possible, Bloch says, mere wishful thinking has been discrediting utopias since history began, both in the realm of practical politics and in the rest of the announcements of velleities, as though every utopia were abstract. Doubtlessly, this utopian function in abstract utopianizing is only immaturely present, like still predominantly lacking a solid subject and lacking relation to the really possible. Now, this really possible, real possible, is distinguished from three other types of possible. The first he calls the formally possible. This is the realm of whatever can in some respect be thought, right? So different from this abstract possible is the possible according to knowledge, the epistemic possible, or the possible in which the objective follows the manner of things. This sense of possible is graded according to the relative incompleteness of our knowledge of factual conditions. Differing from this, what we know is possible is the third, objectively or factually possible. The objectively possible is gradated not according to the incompleteness in our knowledge of factual conditions, but according to the incompleteness in the factual conditions themselves. The inadequacy of even this notion of the objectively or factually possible is that it derives solely from the side of object. The subject merely recognizes it and counts on it, but does not influence it. We can put these three senses of possible in short, in other words. The formally possible is that which is not precluded by thought alone. The epistemically possible is that which is not precluded by what we know. And the factually possible is that which is not precluded by the way things are. And as the way things are means conditions amongst objects in relation to which persons, insofar as persons are contrasted with objects, stand only as spectators. What Bloch points out as the sense of possible leads to mature utopian consciousness in the objectively really possible. This conception does not assume, as the third sense of objectively or factually possible does assume, a single face or pole or cutting edge to process. The notion derives from a grounding in Bloch's Marx-inspired understanding of matter, along with the lines of the left Aristotelianism, matter as an active, not just passive. But dialectically understood, matter as capacity has two faces or poles, a partial conditionality of objects in nature and the partial conditionality of lack of conclusiveness of humanity's laboring in history. So, nature and human subjectivity through labor in history are both unfinished, unconclusive. The lack of fully determining conditions for either nature or humanity considered separately yields a notion of possibility that derives from the intersection of these two phases of process. Utopian consciousness does not just contemplate the intermediacy of natural and historical processes. It participates in them, it collaborates. It does not uniquely determine. Bloch considers inadequate any notion of possibility which either stresses agencies in the world of objects, where they're contrasted with but are unaffected by an agent subject, or stresses agencies of subjects alone. His model is integrative of both subject and object. He bases his notion of concrete on Hegel, but while also departing from him. For the idealist in Hegel, the spirit is a constant state of process, and the concrete is realized through evolving thought. With Bloch, the dialectical materialist, what is in process is the constantly changing material world itself, a process whose direction or end is not predetermined. Hence, Bloch's well-known claim that reality consists not only of what exists and of what has not been realized in the past, but also of what may be, of the not yet, which invokes different layers of utopian possibility and temporality. Bloch to quote Bloch, the real is process. The latter is widely ramified mediation between present, unfinished past, and above all, possible future. Indeed, everything real passes over into the possible, and possible is everything that is only partially conditioned, that has not yet been fully or conclusively determined. What may be what is possible is related to the open structure of reality, and because the future is undefined, it constitutes for Bloch a field of real possibilities on the present, which he calls the real possible. In this sense, the utopian dimension of being exists as a potential that has not yet been realized, and is therefore that which simultaneously actually exists and does not exist. In other words, it can exist being materialized, being actualized, but it can exist only in potentiality, which is still existence. In other words, it is utopia that is realized by the very process of its creation, through a double process of analyzing the objective material conditions in the present and action that germinates the hidden potentialities of these conditions. Rescuing concrete utopia from the pitfalls of abstraction is what Bloch calls docta spes, or comprehended hope, meaning the hope that is not naive. In this context, Ruth Levitas claims that a concrete utopia is both content and function. It is content because it is part of what is not yet in objective reality through the formations of matter in the world. And it is function because it is that part of reality that emerges with its horizon and becomes a driving human force. In other words, we recognize that things do not develop in a desirable fashion by themselves, but that we must take action to realize them, to realize this new possible future. And in this sense, the possible future becomes a real active force to kind of push our participation in realizing it. This is why Bloch speaks of concrete utopia as a process in which we strive to transcend without transcendence, a course of action aimed at overcoming the present and deviating from it to create a future paving the way to what has not yet taken shape. For Bloch, what cannot be seen is also the most immediate or closest to us, which is in constant formation. According to him, the contemporary moment is elusive. It defies the attempt to define or fully grasp it. The perception of the new or the emerging moment is always retroactive. He writes, the now itself, now with a capital N, the now itself remains ultimately the most dark in which we each find ourselves as experiencing beings. The now is the place where the immediate heart of experience in general stands, but stands in question. Thus, what has just been lived itself is the most immediately, that is, the least previously experienceable. Only when a now has just passed, and for as long as it is expected, it is not only lived, but also experienced. As immediately being there, it lies in the darkness of the moment. Only what is just coming up or what has just passed has the distance which the beam of growing consciousness needs to illuminate it. The now, the moment we are in, burrows in itself and cannot feel itself. Correspondingly, therefore, the respective content of what has just been lived is not perceived. And he continues, but then I cannot even experience and occupy myself. Not even just this, that I am smoking or writing. Only immediately afterwards can I easily hold it, turn it before me, so to speak. So only my immediate past is present to me, agrees with what we experience as apparently existent. We are located in our own blind spot, in the darkness of the lived moment, whose darkness is ultimately our own darkness, being unfamiliar to ourselves, being enfolded, being missing. Our inability to fully grasp the present moment allows us to experience and sense the preformed seeds of the future in their very absence. Bloch describes the present moment as imperceptible. And here and now is what escapes recognition and is in this sense a nowhere. Hence, Bloch sees in the concrete present we inhabit the darkness of the living moment, a darkness which folds in its utopian potential that was not realized in past events. However, It is nowhere, not because it lies outside of history and time, or because it is unachievable, but because it is so deeply embedded in this time and place. Unlike the tradition that attributes the good to an ancient source that we need to rediscover or to some kind of eternal being, Bloch sees the past as not yet realized, that encodes the possibilities that can be realized in the future to come. Similarly, the self is not closed or defined identity, but is rather in a constant process of creating and being created. Always in an interplay between the inside and the outside, between the material reality and the possibility of deviation from it. In this sense, Bloch understands utopia through its connection to the present moment. As Bloch describes it above, only my immediate past is present to me, meaning that only what has already taken shape and actually passed is present, and not the immediate moment, because the immediate moment is in the process of becoming. It is emerging or is newly created every moment. As Peter Thomson writes, for Bloch, the spirit of utopia and the principle of hope are to be understood as tendencies and latencies, endlessly open possibilities dependent on the dialectical interplay between contingency and necessity, between what is and what might be. The utopia he wanted was not a programmatic one laid down in any blueprint, but was processual and autopoetic. It would emerge out of the process, out of its own becoming. As Bloch puts it, the process is made by those who are made in the process. So this process is non-deterministic, and the emergence of consciousness out of matter did not have to happen, did not need it to happen. But since it did happen, Bloch claims that human beings are able to recognize themselves and their dreams of a better life as continuous with a material tendency which they can direct towards realizing the possibility of utopia latent within the matter itself. One of the ways to describe Bloch's materialism is to situate it around the question of how subjectivity, with its qualities of experience and apparent freedom of intentionality, can be understood as arising in a world that science tells us is governed by deterministic laws. In opposition to mechanical materialism, whose scientific explanations of the world claim that all worldly phenomena are ultimately explicable in mechanic terms, and thus consciousness is nothing more than an accidental product of the brain's physical process, Bloch rejected this as a reduction of matter to dead, static matter. According to Cat Moir, the concept of matter in Bloch is such that needs to account for existence of consciousness. Bloch contends that emancipation belongs not only to the social realm, but that it is inseparable from the realm of nature. Starting from Marx's thesis about the unity of naturalism and humanism, he wishes to rehabilitate the concept of nature away from the boundaries prescribed by bourgeois philosophy and vulgar materialism, to quote Bloch. This is also the reason why he was often accused of mystification of nature and a return to mysticism. Drawing from various sources, from Stoics, medieval philosophy, to late Renaissance and the philosophy of nature, he was looking for ideas that serve to overcome the notion of nature as merely static, dead material for industrial extraction. Going back to the Spinozian concept of natura naturans, Bloch moves the understanding of nature away from a mere resource towards the understanding of the creativity of nature. Nature cannot be understood quantitatively, just as a mere object. It must contain traces or seeds of subjectivity, but this subjectivity of nature is different from the subjectivity of history. The exact difference between natural and historical subjectivity is still a bit blurred, and Bloch does not delineate them explicitly. However, since he insists on matter as an impersonal agent, this differentiation could be somewhere along the lines of the difference between subject and agent. But taken from the point of view of subjectivity, the world process, which could be a revolutionary change of self-realization of matter in release of its utopian impulses, is at the intersection of subjective and objective. Bloch notes, there is an accordance between mutually coupled intentions in the subject and tendencies in the object, between the utopian function in consciousness and matter and latency in the world, between inexhaustible forwards in the human and the utopian fraught latency in the world. But the mere concrete factors of potentiality, although necessary, are no guarantee of success by themselves, and they need the potency of the realizing agent. Without the realizing subject, there is no realization of the objectively real possible, nor is there any possibilities. In this way, the possibilities in his work are not exclusively located neither in the subjective nor in the objective, but in their mutual process. There is also an important temporal component to this process, what Bloch terms the darkness of the lived moment, mentioned many times before, refers to the notion that even if we live now, that doesn't mean that we experience our lives. Quote, now is not the present, as it is immanently lived and thus not fully experienced. Now is the restless, dark moment in the ultimate proximity to us that sends what is knocking into time and what is throbbing into space. End of quote. Because of the unintentional surplus of the future in the past, and not only there, but in all things, however repressive they might seem, he claims that there is also the utopian surplus, throbbing and knocking, to be actualized. This is why Bloch understands Marxism as a verification and thus a realistic understanding of the future as a tendency, as a latency in the now, maintaining the most approximate possibilities. And we're mentioning the process throughout this. For Bloch, the world as a process means the world is an experiment. Because for him, not only thought could be experimental, but also world history itself is an experiment, a real experiment conducted in the world and aimed towards a possible worlds. There is an advance in history, so to say, and this is not linear, but polyrhythmic and polyphonic advance. Therefore, experimenting and replete with experiments, the human theory moves ahead, according to Bloch, the advance of history moving not unilinear development, but entirely polyrhythmically and polyphonically. The unilinear stage's progressive understanding of history often sees capitalism as its most progressive stage, for which Bloch says it is progressive indeed, but only darkly progressive. Looking at the conditions of the working class during Industrial Revolution, Bloch sees a ghastly minus Bloch sees a ghastly minus that characterizes progress. For progressive is in the same sense as scurvy or tuberculosis. There is no certain chronological index of progression by which what happens later in history is somehow, or on the whole, a progressive plus compared with what has gone before. Bloch underlines that there is a fault in Hegelian notion of negation, which for him leads inevitably to progress, and this kind of unconditional acceptance of Hegelian progress leads to what he calls a triumphalist progressology. He points that there are reversals in this advance, as against an abstract idealization of the passage of time in itself, by means of which the time fetishist ideology of progress is in later social democratic thought postulated an automatic progress, a supposition based on the crude economics that could diverge from an automatic growth in capitalism, the subsequent stage of socialism. This kind of triumphalist progressology did no service to history, according to Bloch, but rather harmed the real advance forwards. For the most part, it served only as the ideology of an individual disinclination, actually to be a cog in the mechanism of history. Bloch is vigorously critical in this temporal unilinearity that forms the kernel of the progressive logic. He sees it as the aporia tied to the deficiency of historical space, that is, the deficiency of accommodating the gigantic amount of non-European historical material in any adequate representation. Therefore, the mere succession of progress is paid for anew. According to this theory, Bloch says, Babylon and ancient Egypt can be treated very simply and as undoubtedly bygone cultures at the beginning of written history. In other words, the non-European, the other, is downgraded to a static geographical space that is temporarily finished, that is closed. He calls this reactionary geographism. The geographically diverse spatial categorization is a static obstacle to any historical proper categorization of time. Accordingly, the aporia, which resulted from this unilinear succession of time as far as the reception or insertion of the historical, and particularly the non-European material was concerned, would be avoided. Indeed, so to speak, would be removed. But by resource to a truly drastic measure, the demise of the coherent process of history itself, which unites countries, peoples, and epochs. This coherent process of history accommodates the plurality of voices, a methodic profusion, an interweaving of time and of epochs, and therefore a spaciousness in the flow of history, which would in no way necessitate any recourse to geographism. In other words, the process of history requires a pluriverse. This pluriverse has an emancipatory component to it, understood as evidence of us still in the process of becoming conscious of freedom. And you can see here is a little nod to obviously Hegel, because for Hegel, this is a process for what progress is, humanity becoming conscious of freedom. Bloch continues. The existing pluriverse of cultures is itself evidence that the humanum is still in the process of becoming conscious of its freedom and selfhood, that it is not yet discovered, but sought for and experimented for everywhere. Therefore, this humanum, still in process, together with the many experimental, explorative, and contributory paths towards it, provides the only genuinely open utopian point of time. Bloch is here advancing his own understanding of the time structure in history. Time is only because something happens, and where something happens, there is time. Okay, so this is the ending of the two parts. They're mostly like going into Bloch's philosophy. They're quite a bit, maybe heavily even philosophical. And now we're going to move from the pluriverse, from different kind of temporalities back to Earth and to literature and to Mars, actually. But before we do that, let me tell you why we're using literature and what is, according to Bloch, the utopian function of art and literature. So Bloch's work is set out for the mapping out of the formations of the not yet conscious as they take shape in daydreams, wish landscapes, and also religious, scientific, political, and artistic events of signification. The signification can be traced into anticipatory illumination and is determined by the way it gives rise to hope within the culture, philosophy, and matter itself. Never missing to emphasis the possibility of the transformation of the material base through the superstructural development, Bloch is especially attentive to the role of art and literature in this process. The notion of anticipatory illumination is the conceptual reflection of the utopian horizons of the not yet conscious and the not yet being, tracing the utopian content in various forms of cultural artifice. Truth is not a reflection of facts, but of processes. It is ultimately the indication of the tendency and latency of that which has not yet become and needs its activator. Literature and art contain the anticipatory illumination on that which has not yet become. This is what shapes the concrete importance of Bloch's work, because it focuses our attention on concrete moments in history that point the way towards an actual transformation of the material world. The illumination ecstatic quality of these concrete moments, even though they are fragmentary, allows them to be utilized and reutilized for realizing what has not yet become, but can become, namely the classless society. Insofar as the aesthetic formations illuminate what is missing and might still come, they instill hope in viewers or readers and provide the impetus for individual and collective change. At the center of this illumination arising from the not yet conscious, Bloch situates the notion of presentiment, which is a material, secular, and non-transcendental category, shaping the meaning for which paves the way ahead, and which, in its most active form, connects itself with the imagination, particularly with the imagination of that which is objectively possible. Art and literature assume their utopian function precisely at this point, where the mechanism of presentiment within the anticipatory illumination grows into that which is not yet come as incubation, as so-called inspiration, as explication and material realization. Consequently, a substantial material art is always an open art, or the groundwork for an actual portrayal of the tendency and latency of its objects. To quote Bloch, the aesthetic anticipatory illumination is precisely what it is because it stands on the horizon of the real itself. But this means content, utopian and real content, not the content of an illusionary abstract appearance. This means that the anticipatory illumination is ordered according to the dimension and status of its utopian meaningful subject. And instead of the impenetrable enjoyment of art, it provides a connection to knowledge, at the very least, and it provides a connection to the material of grasped hope, at the very most. Grounded in this way, Bloch presents the utopian function as something concrete, always related to the real possibility in the now. And even if his form resists almost every systematization, this thought is quite clear. Roaming through the cultural artifacts of art, but not only that, as we said, through medicine, technology, religion, science, politics, daydreams, everyday rituals, and so on, the presentiment enveloped within the anticipatory illumination opens up the real possibility to the utopian horizon, which affects reality. Here we can trace the interplay of reality and fiction as the conceptual support for interpreting them intertwined rather than diametrically separated. Bloch explicitly names this the tendentious utopian realism that holds up mirror of immanent anticipation in an activating way. And we come to the final parts here where we're gonna see these anticipatory illuminations in a concrete piece of text, piece of literature, which is Robinson's The Mars trilogy. So I'm not gonna recount all aspects of it. I'm just gonna mention some aspects of the plot, those that are important for me for my argument here. So Robinson's Mars trilogy, written at the beginning of the 90s, basically begins as it goes with a mission to Mars. So the mission to Mars begins with the intention of appropriating the planet's natural resources to feed a futuristic system of capitalism, which Robinson first describes as transnational and later as metanational. But while still abroad, the spaceship Ares, the first expeditionary team, nicknamed the First 100, eschewed the United Nations Charter in order to turn their mission into an opportunity to re-envision the life itself, or to re-envision the life as it can be. A singular vision, however, does not exist, and without recourse to the oppressive but unifying UN Charter, harmony never materializes, leaving the First 100 completely fragmented and atomized. Every member is thus free to pursue their own particular vision of that elusive new life with equal legitimacy. So the characters go on, do their own stuff. Basically, one goes through their career, the other one goes to their space elevator projects, the third one goes to their militant rejection of Earth, and so on. But the most utopian of these projects understands that the point is not to make another Earth, not another Alaska or Tibet, not a Vermont nor a Venice, not even an Antarctica. The point is to make something new and strange, something Martian. The possibility of reinventing life on Mars is predicated not on reforming dysfunctional aspects of Earth, but on creating a hitherto non-existent world corresponds very well with what Marx and Engels understood to be at issue in the struggle to overcome the capitalist mode of production. For us, write Marx and Engels, the issue cannot be the alteration of private property, but only its annihilation, not the smoothing over the class antagonisms, but the abolition of classes, not the improvement of existing society, but the foundation of a new one. Revolution is the process for creating this new mode of life. And by their participation in that process, the fragmented first 100 transform into a genuine Martian collective. An interesting feature of the Mars trilogy is that revolution reoccurs throughout, appearing in each installment, each time taking on a different, more alien form. In Red Mars, the first book, revolution appears in its most recognizable form as a violent revolt led by the vanguard, Arkady Bogdanov, and his faction, which has the opposite effect of increasing and intensifying the intransient Terrean presence. In Green Mars, revolution is reconceptualized with a constellation of metaphors borrowed from physical science, agriculture, and economics. And finally, in Blue Mars, revolution takes on a totally unfamiliar form as it is linked to quote Robinson, a choir in counterpoint singing a great fugue. In the novel, as in history, revolution is not without undersides. It was obvious to Marx that the socialist revolution should bear no resemblance to the previous bourgeois ones. Communism is still to be achieved through revolution, but only after a complete overhaul of its method. Revolution must be rethought, or as Marx put it, the social revolution of the 19th century cannot draw its poetry from the past, but only from the future. That means completely dismantling it, re-examining its tactics, and expunging its problematic features. Robinson's repetitive technique can be used with great effectiveness towards this end, as each reoccurrence of revolution can be seen as a kind of controlled test run that reveals designs flawed that are then corrected in subsequent design. Red Mars thus reveals the violence and top-down chain of command associated with war as decisive flaws. These flaws are then nullified in Green Mars by basing revolution on a cluster of metaphors. But even this strategy possesses shortcomings that must be negated by a third design. And the resulting negation of the negation is the revolution as a choir, that is something so complex and non-violent that it was hard to see it as a revolution at all, as Robinson writes. So the first revolution, an armed revolt called the Revolution of 61, that happens in Red Mars, is a complete and total failure. Martian settlements, as Robinson describes them, are either nestled in craters covered by domes or housed under tents. And so, quote, it was not so hard to destroy Martian towns, no harder than breaking a window or popping a balloon. So thus, mounting a counterstrike is as easy as breaching these fragile coverings, followed by a sequence of where oxygen or aerated fuels were introduced and then quickly followed by an ignitor that caused explosions on varying severity. The result of these tactics is widespread destruction, and Robinson is clearly uninterested in glorifying or romanticizing revolutionary violence as he describes this destruction in great detail. And so the Revolution of 61 unfolds in a terrible manner, with Martian settlements taking the brunt of the damage. Police troops were wrecking towns to stop the rebellion, and rebels were wrecking towns to keep the rebellion alive, as Robinson writes. Adding to the chaos is the existence of a dozen of splinter factions, none of which are coordinated, leading to the suspicion that the revolutionaries are fighting for self-interested motives rather than the collective ones. Total chaos, basically. When order is finally restored, many Martians, including the revolutionary mastermind himself, Arkady, are dead. Terror and security forces have enlarged their presence on Mars, and the revolutionaries are driven underground. Robinson sums up the entire abject operation through the eyes of his character Nadia in these terms. The revolt seemed to Nadia more a waste than ever, an unfocused spasm of rage, the ultimate cutting of one's nose in spite to one's face. The whole world wrecked. So despite the disastrous conclusions of the Revolt of 61, Robinson is not done with revolution, as Green Mars opens with a potentiality of the second one. So there might be another revolution. I don't know. So anything might happen, I guess, but revolution is a rare thing. And indeed, Green Mars culminates in the second revolution. Nadia took a deep breath, let it out. She said, "Let's go then. I was hoping you would say that. I'll call them to Burroughs and give them the words." and so that they had started a revolution. So why this repetition of revolution, and what is Robinson trying to tell us? Or if he's not trying to tell us, we can read stuff into it. In this context, we can turn to Zizek's theory of repetition in his book on Lenin, where he says, repeating Lenin means giving new life to this hope, the hope that history will vindicate the oppressed. He writes, as a result, repeating Lenin does not mean a return to Lenin. To repeat Lenin is to accept that Lenin is dead, and that this particular solution failed, even failed monstrously, but that there was a utopian spark in it worth saving. Repeating Lenin means that we have to distinguish between what Lenin actually did and the field of possibilities he opened up. To repeat Lenin is to repeat not what Lenin did, but what he failed to do, his missed opportunities. So the repetition of a failed project must be done again to reclaim its utopian impulse. And this line of thinking leads us back to Bloch, of course, as Bloch writes in The Spirit of Utopia, with us, things awaken completely beyond their current applicable laws and move within feasible potentiality. We, however, carry this spark of the end of thought through the course, and the spark is still open, full of unarbitrary real possibility. Here is a Blochian reminder that every historical endeavor, successful or disastrous, possesses an unrealized element. The utopian spark, the impulse, is actually the not yet. Because in the realizing element itself, there is something that has not yet realized. The novum, in this case, a set of social conditions, is invoked through the not yet, in which it can be actualized. One should never wait until the moment when all the theoretical conditions of possibility are met before taking a certain action, because those conditions are opened up, are created by what is left unfulfilled in the action itself. An action's failure creates the conditions of possibility for its success, thus enabling, even begging its repetition in a way. Hence, the world as process is itself the enormous testing of its satisfied solution, that is, of the realm of dissatisfaction, as Bloch writes in The Principle of Hope. I would read Robinson's technique of repetition then as an attempt to reclaim the utopian impulse of revolutionary method. In this way, his character Nadia argues that the new method does not emerge from nothingness, but from reinventing existing methods, even the failed ones. The fact that the revolution failed in the past is not evidence that it is outmoded or incompatible with utopia. It simply means that it requires repeating. And that will be all. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ristem.
Thank you, Maja. Thank you, Maja. For the first time, maybe in my life, somebody in a very brief moment answered something that I was struggling for a very long time. Okay, I will first open the floor. Can you please stop sharing so we can hear? I will first give the floor to the participants. If they don't mind, I will ask the question, but first let us give the floor to them.
Yes, hi, hello. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. Yeah. And so I have two observations or questions. The first one is about like the Bloch's position. I'm not very familiar with Bloch's work, but this was very useful. And his position reminds me a lot of two characters, we can say, which are Walter Benjamin and François Laruelle. So in Walter Benjamin gives me a lot of it seems to connect to the weak messianism. And in Laruelle there is this discussion about messianism and and about utopia as not something that pertains to some kind of ontologization of the future, but to some kind of something that can be folded back into the present, so some kind of space. And so my question here would be, is, because maybe I missed it, is Bloch ontologizing the future or not? It's something that pertains to the potentiality of the present, or even to the present itself, to how it opens.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for your question, and thank you for joining us, actually. Yeah, these are like, exactly, you're right. So Benjamin most definitely would be one of the comrades of Bloch, and they actually were in correspondence, and they worked on so many similar things. Obviously, the notion of messianism, right, and temporality and time, or the, how does Benjamin says, the Jetztzeit, right, that corresponds to Blochian conception of time. And obviously they differ in many options, but yeah, they overlap, and we could talk about Bloch and Benjamin for another hour. Laruelle, I agree with you completely, and I'm trying in the last maybe a year or so to read Laruelle and then to try to make some connections, but for some reason I still haven't done it because he's so, to me at least, for some reason, like very dense and difficult to read. And Bloch is, as well, is not easy, you know, like, but Laruelle is like next level here. So, but yeah, I have, as Bloch would say, I have anticipatory illumination. I have a premonition that the two of them are talking of a similar thing, at least, if not the same. And yeah, the Laruelle's book, Struggle and Utopia, is definitely, you know, on my list to try to do some work on it. And in terms of the ontologizing the future. Okay, so Blochian philosophy of utopia, utopian philosophy contains like ontological side of it, right? So for him, this ontological, for him actually the most important thing is that the ontology is unfinished, right? That's why he's like against all of these possibilities of determinations, right? And in this unfinished ontology, future only figures in it. So I wouldn't say that future is ontologized. I would say that future is a very important part, prominent maybe part, in the Blochian ontology of utopia, basically. Because in this case, I forgot to mention actually when I was speaking of temporality, but for Bloch also, you know, the way that we perceive time and temporality, past, present, future, kind of this kind of line doesn't stand for Bloch. For Bloch, the primal tense is the future tense, right? And then from the future tense, because kind of the future is sending us signals to the now, which is the present, which is, as you heard, kind of not useless, but you know, we can't grasp it. So the now is never now, right? The now is only waiting or remembering. But the entire kind of temporal, let's say, action, the temporal chain, is launched from the future, basically. So future is the primal temporal tense that launches the entire chain of temporality for Bloch. So in this case, and in this case, yeah, the future is open, and it figures as a primal, as a very important aspect of his utopian ontology in this openness, in this what is coming, what is not yet, but is also unknown, in the sense of it's not going to be a repetition of the present, you know. So it definitely features importantly in his ontology, but I wouldn't say that it is itself ontologized in Bloch.
Okay, thank you. So it's similar to, it seems to be similar to Nick Land's.
No, don't tell me that.
No, but in
no,
reverse,
I know,
right?
but he's right.
In reverse,
Really?
like instead of having an attractor that is thanatropic, so it's leading everything to chaos or a thermodynamic equilibrium, you have instead like the left wing reading of that seems to.
Okay.
Or not, like in a sense that as I understood it, the temporality is structured as a gaze from the future, so that
from the future, yeah, exactly. yeah, and so if Land says that, then I guess
it's like
that's that.
Filippo, don't forget. Filippo, don't forget that that Nick Land was once a leftist.
Once?
Once a leftist. Nick Land was a leftist.
But all as all these guys were once leftist, and then
yes,
exactly.
of course, yes.
Yeah.
I'm just referring to the philosophical material,
not
to the neo-reactionary one, of course. But
but this is, I would agree, and this is.
Sorry, Maja. Sorry, no, just because the point of connection was the difference here. Then is that Bloch is a kind of humanist, while Land instead is it's scaling up, enlarging the scale. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree, and that might be the reason why in some contemporary in contemporary critical theory, at least, like often people would tend to discard Bloch's position precisely because of his humanism, because of his Hegelian Marxism, because of all these things that are like too tainted by modernity, like all that stuff. But for me, he was always interesting because he's always kind of in between realms, like in his life, in his career, also in his philosophy. Yes, he is like, he's a humanist, he's a Hegelian Marxist, but then he goes on into a processual philosophy, into the notion of becoming, which sounds almost like Deleuzian at points, he's like he's like very, he has a very wide span, which are very satisfactory to interpret in my own work,
Absolutely. Okay, yeah. Well, I think I work on that way, so think about his humanism now.
Okay, great.
That's great, right?
That's great. Yeah, and I really want to work. So I want to do something. I want to put Laurel in somehow, but I need to manage to read.
Yeah.
So would you say like The Struggle and Utopia would be the book to go to for the connection between the two of them? Or
probably also The Future Christ, maybe. It's it could be interesting because they are like the later one, and maybe a bit more accessible instead of that rambling of but
okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my wife, again.
Filippo, thank you. Filippo, thank you. If you both will indulge me in my stupid question, because the level now is upscale. But I had for a long years I had a problem understanding one book. By the way, Filippo, sorry, but it's a Montenegro writer called Ognjen Spahić. It's called The Children of Hasanev. It's about the last leper colony located in Romania. It's a book that just pitch on the two notions. It's not hope and action, but it's a spectral utopia. And somehow ends at an emancipatory history.
It ends where? Sorry?
On the emancipatory history.
Okay.
I was always wondering, because meeting you, I go and read that, and it was always intuitive, which is because I'm coming from a theater background. It's always, it's kind of good for me to come intuitively. I can understand it, but it's, where I understand the revolutionary potential. I understand the revolutionary potential, but we somehow now
more than ever, I think, are in the very big process of like combining a pure Nietzscheanism with worship. This is the turning point, you know. It's scary. It's crazy scary. For me, it's crazy scary because it's maybe the first time we are not first time. Come on, sorry for my blubbering. It's not the first time we were not there for the October Revolution and so on and so on. But now, more than ever, we have the potential of changing something. You know, Filippo, sorry, the whole book is about the last leper colony in Romania. It happens the whole scene is 10 days before Ceausescu is like gunned down, executed in the square. And the main character goes to Germany. You know, it's basically the whole book. It's a very nice book and so on and so on. But do you think that this is an utopia or dystopia?
Well, okay.
The whole scene, it's utopia or dystopia, not the book, but the whole world.
Okay, so first, you know, in literature, in genre theory, I work a bit in science fiction genre theory. I use it for my research.
It's Platonov. It's basically
and I wanted my, as you have seen from my abstract.
I know that's why I'm throwing Spahic in the whole.
But it would be just, I think Platonov would be too much just to continue after all this with Platonov. I realized like, okay, I should stop. I cannot go into that. But yeah, so exactly, the vibe is very Platonov vibe, right? And so first, like, okay, in genre theory, and also similar to how Bloch understands utopia, as in good place, bad place, as in, utopia, dystopia distinction. Dystopia is not the opposite of utopia. They belong to the same real. One is, the best possible world. The other one is
world versus 84.
The other one is the worst possible world. But in both cases, for both utopia and dystopia, there is an opening to an alternative world, right? Whether it's bad or good, we do have a possibility of a different world, right? And the opposite of utopian functionality is what we call anti-utopia, which would be some kind of stupid, cruel realism, which presents no alternative to the existence, no alternative to the given. So even the most hardcore dystopias, are actually in the utopian realm because they put you in front of hell. They put you in the doors of hell, right?
And historically in the literature, the worst dystopias are utopias, or they finish
and then they converge very often. Very often. And then something opposite to this would definitely, as I said, it would be some kind of anti-utopian stance that does not allow for any alternative to the given, right? Now, in a text like these that you mentioned, and also the world like this that we live in, these are very often, lately, almost always described as dystopias, right? As a kind of the worst possible scenario. And especially like Platonov and texts like Platonov and Spahic as well, you have this feeling of, you feel the atmosphere of this place. You feel the gray of the grimness of the place. You feel the cold. You feel the hunger as you read. And yet these writers are so poetic at the same time, so that you're reading this kind of, you put in this kind of heavy place, and yet you read the text that seems almost like poetry, basically, that is full of love, somehow full of love, like in the middle of this death, for example, And what I wanted to talk about on that note, but we can leave it for some other seminar or something, with Platonov is precisely this. So with Robinson, we've got this classic narrative, we go somewhere, we establish a revolution, we create a new world, okay? That's a kind of classic narrative, which also might be problematic from the point of like imperial logic and so on. But with Platonov, it's completely the opposite, right? So with Platonov, the world, so the revolution happened, and it's just that these places that he's describing have not been reached by it, right? So not that the revolution failed, so to say in Platonov, not that the revolution failed, but the revolution never managed
to potential.
Exactly, never managed to actualize, It's not that the Red October never happened, it's that it never happened to it never completely actualized all over, you know what I mean? So
the potential energy versus the kinetic ones.
Exactly. And then in terms of this situation, I think he's good at making us think in what Bloch talks about the tendency and latency, about how to tune into this potentiality. Okay, let's see, we pay attention to this. Let's say we are aware of our subjective forces through the comprehensive hope, right? Let's say we got that. Let's say we can sense something's going on, right? That would be it's like when you like something's happening, right? That would be kind of situation where this would happen. And then the question obviously is then how to tune into these potentialities, how to extract this potentiality, let's say revolutionary potentiality, out of the realm of potentiality into the realm of the actual, basically. Because even though it is, even while it's in the realm of the potential, it is still real, according to Bloch, But this is not enough. It has to actualize, it has to kind of, let's say, materialize in the world, in this world, in order to fulfill the utopian function, right? So I think that in the midst of all the, all the horror, all the dystopia, all the fear, all the confusion, all the chaos, there is always potentiality, and it's on us, and it's on us to figure out how to actualize it.
And revolutionary.
That is it, of course, of course.
Thank you, Maja. First of all, again, it's not something that I was expecting, but I was working for quite a few years of trying to do a theater play on that book. It was eye-opening. The whole lecture was eye-opening because in theater, you must find these niches of understanding, keys for some scenes. The whole book is brilliant. If you never read it, if you, all of us who are watching, if you never read it, please read it. It's in English now. It's brilliant. It's maybe dark in some sense. From us, from the Balkans, it's not dark. Even though Filippo is a Mediterranean, it's not dark for him also. But for the rest of the Western world, maybe it's dark because it's sinister. It's not dark, it's sinister. But it has a full potential of a human hope, a full potential of something unexpected, something that is near to us. For example, the last leper colony was extinguished in the 96 in Romania by burning it, which is terrifying. I'm guessing there were people there. Nobody talks about that. The Utopia and the dystopia. But nevertheless, I'm blabbering a lot. And what Maja said, Filippo, you can say to Maya that the superposition theory is a very good thing, that she can start reading, because I had a feeling that the superposition theory of L'Oreal is something that you can start with that.
Yeah.
It's a very niche theory, very maybe out of something, but the superposition is the superposition.
Okay, I will. Noted.
Noted. L'Oreal. Thank
Yeah,
you.
on this note, I thought about another book that maybe
Yeah.
is on Laruelle instead of being by
Yeah.
Laruelle. It's
Oh,
by Anthony Paul Smith,
Ah, yes.
A Stranger Thought, which maybe it's there is a whole chapter about futurity, so it probably
well,
is
cool.
useful.
Thank you.
And
Thank
instead,
you.
no, I wanted to ask, the Platonov book is Chevengur.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking I probably would be Chevengur, but also I love the Foundation Pit a lot. It's also beautiful. I love the Soul. It's also beautiful. With Platonov, it's always the same, more or less the same plot, you know? So to me, it feels just like a one big book, all of his novels. But yeah, but Chevengur is definitely the kind of magnum opus of his.
Okay.
By the way, if I can again, I'm blabbering. Zemyatin. Also.
Yeah.
There is another writer who is called Zemyatin, who basically is also. We are very dark.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like, the Soviet dystopias, especially from around that period, they're really, really good. I mean, like having in mind that they all wrote at the same time. So also like brothers Strugatsky, you know, Alexei and Boris, I mean, like the Roadside Picnic.
Ilfi Petrov.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and they all wrote at the same time around this like 1920s, 30s, and all like masterpieces, basically. Yeah.
Do you know Antoine Volodine?
That sounds familiar, but
he's a contemporary writer. He's a French with probably Soviet origins, and his main work is called Radiant Terminus. And it's a Soviet dystopia. Oh no, sorry, a post-apocalyptic thing, and it's quite interesting because it's something now I was connecting to to Maya's discourse about.
He's a Czech, by the way. Sorry, Philip.
He is
He's a Czech.
He's a French guy.
French.
No, he's a French or a Czech French.
No, good.
Because Mrožek, UNESCO, they're all French. But
no. I think he's yes, he is born in France. Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, probably. But yes, of Russian origins, only origins.
Okay. Like Peter Brook, for example.
Yeah,
but Russian, by the way.
Yeah, he sets this kind of post-apocalyptical works in Russia or in a Soviet Union. In
yeah.
No, and it was interesting because it's something connected to the Mars thing, about like not repeating Earth on Mars, but creating something completely exotic.
No, but you have I have a friend who is like specialized in SSR fiction. You have these gems, little ones with French authors who are, I don't know, brilliant. We know Len, we know Asimov, we know, but you have this 1 million little Romanians and Poles and Czechoslovakians who are, like it's brilliant because it's full of radical thinking, and a potential of the writing. Maybe it's funny now, but in the same time you will see how the thought was, brilliant. Not only that, full of potential, revolutionary potential. There is an anecdote of 70s, 80s in Czechoslovakia that the fiction novels were the starting line of the revolution. You know, so it's brilliant how art or fiction or the notion of utopia. I don't think that they had that notion, but nevertheless, they never thought of dystopia. They were always thinking of utopia, which is, kind of funny.
Yeah.
Asimov was writing about utopias, not dystopias. The short stories are always for utopia, not dystopia.
Yeah.
Which is eventually becoming dystopia, but he was never the go-gate. The go-goat was never dystopia.
Yeah, but I mean, in literature, especially in utopian literature, which is like all that, like especially you can, if you're like you can venture so much beyond, like in literature, because like with all these like with fabulations, with like extrapolations, with all the speculations of the alternatives to the given, you can really push it in literature so far to the point of like. I think that it's really useful to do these things for the material reality, actually, to push it far in literature,
Yes, but it's very funny that always ends up in this very elaborate, very sound dystopia.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like somebody, not somebody, the author is like very not concrete, but very clever how to push that.
But you know what else? Like you've got as well, like so I don't know if you heard of this guy, which he's a Yugoslav guy, but he's like in his 80s, 90s now. He's one of the founders of utopian studies. He's one of the main theorists behind science fiction genre theory. It's Darko Suvin, right? So he's like so he's a Croatian guy who left Yugoslavia. I don't know, even in late 70s or something. He went for Canada and he was working all his life there at the university. So, for example, Suvin would be your classic, typical, good Marxist, like poštena inteligencia, as we say, like honest intelligentsia, basically.
Practice true and true.
Yeah. So really, really like a proper Marxist, but proper Marxist, like no tolerance for any postmodernist. Nothing. Okay. So, but even though we still use his definitions of a genre, which obviously nowadays have to be a little bit adapted for this contemporary moment. But anyway,
hermeneutic,
But man was kind of open to the weird stuff, like that he doesn't tolerate. But Suvin, for example, would tell you that, I mean, obviously, he distinguishes between like what he calls like good substantial dystopia, which would be Zemyatin, which would be, I guess, Strugatsky, which would be all the stuff that we mentioned, Platonov and all that. And then he says like, okay, that's one thing, that's a serious thing, but that's very rare. He says usually what happens to dystopia, as like with Orwell, for example. Orwell, he hated Orwell. And he's like, why. That would be the and that would be the classical because that's the classical scenario with dystopias, that they're used basically for reactionary purposes, that they're used to confront you to the worst possible world so that you appreciate the shit you live in. Pardon my French. You know what I mean? Like, so that you appreciate the given conditions of your existence, because
the oppressor is putting a scenario that oppresses you.
Exactly. And then because when you're put in front of an Orwellian text, which is like a pure oppression and horror, then you're thinking, oh, great, this is lovely. I can go to supermarket now. I can live my life. This world is amazing, And Suvin would always he would always be so critical to this, and especially in the context of contemporary fiction in post-Soviet Union, actually, territory, like in Russia.
Okay.
He said like he noticed this genre that's been appearing there since, let's say, since early 2000s onwards, and I think we had that too in the Balkans, the retrofuturism. I don't know
Oh,
if
yeah.
you know, like so
Yeah.
suddenly we're discovering these big narratives of our future, which looks like medieval kingdom, you know, like so Macedonia and Serbia are in the future, but actually we're having feudal lords that are fighting with swords and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's this typical kind of reactionary kind of misusage of dystopian tropes.
I'm really curious what he thinks about Philip K. Dick.
Subin, I think I think he appreciates the grandmasters, you know, like I think.
No. Philip K. Dick, and especially Do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. I think
The
that
Blade
that
Runner.
is, yeah, the Blade, not exactly the Blade Runner, but
Not exactly, but yeah.
No. But the fundament text is, I think it doesn't have hope there.
You don't like it?
No, I like it.
You like it?
I like it because it's a Nietzschean for me. Enough Nietzschean for me.
Nihilist. It's a nihilist.
Yes, it's nihilist. Yes, it's a nihilist enough for me because it's for me that text is not milking but extracting the whole pleasure out of it, even though it starts pleasurable. It's like there is a pure dark after that, and it has a logic. It has a good writing. Not only that, it has a, which is not so much the case in a lot of writing. For example, for Asimov has a like it's a Swiss cheese, his writing, but nevertheless, Philip K. Dick, especially that book. I'm not going through the main in the other of his books, but that is I don't know, a very beautiful specimen of what hope dystopia correlation is all about. Okay, sorry about my again. I'm rambling. Sorry, I will call you individually. We must finish that.
We should.
Yeah. We must finish that. I must release you. Thank you again. We will see you on the 21st with Alfie Brown. By the way.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for watching. If you had a question, please write to the SMR Gmail. I needed to talk to Maja because I now know how to dramatize something that was bothering me for 5 years. So thank you. And thank you, Filippo, for your interventions.
Thank you very much.
Ole, yeah. Thank you, Riste. Thank you, Filippo.